rather before the queries, on to the experts and getting their high risk and low risk ideas. Kunal, I'll start first with you. What are the ideas that you have for the viewers today?
My calls, first one which I'm suggesting is a buy on Vatek Wabag, stock giving a breakout, targets to be kept at approximately 320 levels. And the second is a buy on SH Kelkar. I think that stock is also heading towards a breakout. So would suggest a buy for a target of 166 and stop us at 144.
All right, Gaurang, what are your ideas for us today?
So Alex, we have a showstopper in form of Godrej Consumer products from the FMCG space, thanks to the numbers that they delivered. I've picked one investment idea from the FMCG space, and that is Dabur India. It's been a stellar performer, got multiple products to offer in the Ayurvedic segment and new launches coming through. On the earnings visibility, we have kept a target of 620 on Dabur. And the second one is from the buzzing space, PSU, public sector companies. And this one is a bank, the largest bank, State Bank of India. On the earnings that we've seen and the recovery that lies ahead, we have kept a target of 435. Now, both these are fundamental long-term ideas, so you need to have at least year and a half plus kind of a time horizon.
Okay. Interesting ideas coming in, Gaurang. In fact, we've got questions on quite a few of these companies as well. In fact, perhaps I think one or two of the companies that you have mentioned, Kunal and Gaurang, are also being asked about by our viewers on social media. Let's start with the first question that's coming in on YouTube. Samir Ganguly is asking about HDFC, which was bought at levels of 2420. The stock is currently trading around his buy price, Kunal. He's asking what levels he should bear in mind right now. The stock is trading a little weak today, but what's the chart indicating for the near term?
I think it's a stock which has somehow gone into a time correction, price correction in last 3 months. I think from a high of 2,850, it's just drifted lower gradually. So the reason why I'm calling it as drift rather than more of a steep correction, because it's almost taken 3.5 to 4 months for the stock to correct from those 2,800 to 2,400, 420 levels where it's trading. So it's coming closer to a lower end of the support. 2350 was the previous month low as well for HDFC, where the stock bounced off from those levels. So it's very close to a support level. I think if you're in from a longer term or even a medium term kind of a time horizon, I think you can stay invested over here and wait for maybe another 50 to 70 rupee on the downside. If the stock happens to come back to that 2,350 level, I think that could be a good level where you can look to re-enter or maybe look to average again.
All right, the next viewer query is from Danny Verghese. He wants to know whether it's a good time to enter India Mart for the longer term. Gaurang, what's your view coming in on India Mart?
So, positive, Cheryl, but in terms of volumes, you don't see great volumes. And moves on the downside, upside are also quite erratic. But if you are looking to invest from a 1.5 year plus kind of time horizon, get into it. Staggered approach, that means buy on dips or add on dips would be an appropriate way to accumulate the stock.
Okay, I want to actually ask a technical question, and this is for you, Kunal. Sagar is asking about Deepak Fertilizers, bought at levels of 2,500, bought 2,500 shares at 110 levels. Should you hold for more upside at this point?
Well, I think if he's bought at 110 levels and still holding on, I think it's congratulations to the viewer for holding on to this stock. So we were discussing the stock yesterday as well, and I mentioned that the last 4-5 months for Deepak Fertilizer have been very, very fruitful. From a rise or from a point of 150, it's jumped up to almost 300 levels at current basis. So it looks very strong in terms of momentum, but I think a much more better strategy for over here is to try and maybe book out 25 to 30% of your profits over here, because after such a steep run, it's natural that these stocks, they either go through some sort of a time or price correction. So you can book out some partial profits over here on Deepak Fertilizer and then wait for the stock to ebb off a bit, let the stock come back to say 240 to 50 levels. That's where you can look to buy back again. So you can hold on to your major chunk of the quantity, but I think partial profit booking over here is what I would advise on Deepak Fertilizers.
All right, our next viewer query is coming in from Anjali Sharma. She wants to know, wants to have a short-term view on Dish TV. Does it make sense to buy this particular counter at current valuation? What's your take on Dish TV, Gaurang? Makes sense to invest in this particular stock, even if it's for a short term?
Well, my humble request to all your viewers, Cheryl, would be that don't look at the price of the stock and get into it, because that might turn into a harakiri, because it's been a wealth destroyer and there is huge competition that lies ahead for such companies. My advice would be to look at IDFC First Bank from a medium to long term point of view.
Okay, fair enough. In fact, let's get in another question then. This one on Tata Coffee. I'm coming to you on this one, Kunal. What are the target prices that you would look at from the perspective of what you see on the charts?
I think from a near-term view, the stock seems to have formed its near-term top or near-term resistance. I think it's moved up significantly higher, almost 50% jump in just a matter of 2 or 3 weeks for the stock, from 120 levels to 180, 185, which it tested yesterday. So the rise has been quite steep in a very short span of time. I think it's prudent enough to take profits over here and let the stock come back to a moderate kind of a zone. I think if it comes back to 140, 145, that could be a midpoint of this 60 point, 70 point rally for Tata Coffee. Then I think that could probably be a good entry point yet again for the stock price. So I would suggest the profit booking over here and then wait for another 20-25 rupees correction from current levels. I think that could be a good entry point and a good strategy for the stock.
All right, our next query is coming in from Rajan Vithal. He wants to know whether it's good time to enter Dabur or some correction is likely, or is the stock likely to see some correction in the next 6 to 12 months? Gaurang had a view on Dabur. It was one of his picks in the high risk, low risk ideas. So Kunal, what is your view coming in on Dabur? How are the charts looking for this particular counter?
In fact, I think last week we had done this discussion on FMCG stocks, specifically comparing Dabur and Marico, and I mentioned that how Dabur and Marico both have been very close to performing each other. Somehow Dabur in the last 3 weeks has lost its way a bit. It's underperformed Marico, and Marico has shot up significantly higher. It's gone to a different tangent altogether, trying to break past above its major swing highs. So I think relatively and specifically from a shorter term view, I think Marico could be a better bet. Dabur is still trying to grapple through its downward drift, may probably correct by another 5, 7, 10% from current levels. So if you're in from a longer term haul, then buy on dips approach on Dabur could be a good strategy. But if you're in from a shorter term view, then I believe buying Marico could be a better bet instead of Dabur.
Okay, coming to you on this next one, Gaurang. Satya has got a question on Hindustan Aeronautics, and he's specifically asking whether it's going to see a boom on account of the size of its order book. That's always a question with these defense companies, though, the execution of the order book. What do you have to say about that, and is it a good stock to enter?
So Alex, you must be aware about sonic boom that fighter jets create once they reach a particular speed. And Hindustan Aeronautics, we've been positive as an IPO. We had come out of the subscribe. Then of course we had the large order coming in from the Indian Air Force for Tejas fighter jets. This was not only restricted to India, but HAL has also got orders for this Tejas fighter jets from across the world. Recently they tied up with Rolls-Royce engines, if I'm not mistaken. I stand to be corrected if I have misinformed about that. But a great stock and a fantastic defense FDI play in terms of long-term investment idea.
All right, our next query is coming from Ajit Panda, saying that he wants to know whether he should exit his current holding in Venky's. He bought about 20 shares at 1,510 rupees per share. Kunal, what's your take on Venky's? That particular counter saw a very sharp surge after its earnings. So what should Ajit do with his holding currently?
If there is a chance that the viewer can hold on to the stock, I think it's better, because I think this seems to be a more of a calibrated breakout for Venki's. I was just looking at the charts on a slightly medium term to long term basis over the last 2.5 or 3 years, and the stock seems to have come out for the first time after 2.5 to 3 years of consolidation. So this seems to be a very strong breakout for Venki's. And if this breakout sustains, assumingly for the next couple of months, you might see the stock moving up to a very steady and a gradual kind of an uptrend. So I think if you've been holding on to the stock earlier, and if you're in the money, if you're in profits in the stock, then I would suggest you should hold on to it from a medium-term view. Give the stock another 3 to 6 months. I would sense that at least a 20 to 25% upside in the near term could be in the offing for the stock.
Okay, I believe we have a question on Twitter from Manoj. And while Manoj, you've asked about 3 stocks, I'm going to take the liberty of choosing one, since we take only one per person. Gaurang, he's asking about Manappuram. What do you have to say about the gold financiers, and would you prefer this one, or would you prefer Muthoot? Would you prefer the mainstream lending companies?
So Alex, we've been positive on both Muthoot and Malappuram, but the problem is the short to medium term re-lockdown, restricted lockdown in various cities. That could dampen rather the earnings from this financial year. First, second quarter could be under pressure, but long term we remain extremely positive, and the corrections that have come in both these counters are great opportunity to nibble into the stock from a long term point of view.
All right, our next query is actually coming in from Saeed. He wants to know whether he can buy Apollo tires at current level. What's your take coming in on Apollo tires, Kunal? Makes sense to nibble into the stock at current levels?
Well, looks like I think many of these tire stocks, Cheryl, they've been looking very, very strong. Apollo Tires, I remember clearly that, post a couple of quarters back, when the stock had broken out that 170, 175 hurdle, it went into a completely different level altogether. The range has changed for the stock. You're seeing many of the tire stocks. So even at a time, imagine that many of these large cap auto stocks are still struggling. You have many of the tire names which are still looking very strong and formidable on the chart. So Apollo Tire is one of the stock. I would probably suggest that why not add up even Balkrishna Industries. I think even that stock looks more formidable and more strong from from the tire space. So rather than looking at just one stock, I would suggest have a look at Apollo Tires as well as Balkrishna Industries.
Okay, I want to come back to you on this next one because we've got a couple of our viewers who are asking about L&T Infotech. One is already bought at levels of 3750, and another is asking whether to accumulate, and what entry price would you suggest? So Kunal, what's your answer on this one?
So I would suggest that wait for maybe some more dip. So for the individual who's asking for a better level to enter, I think around 3500 could be a good level to enter the stock price. It's gone into a downward drift. It's gone into a correction or a time-wise, price-wise correction, and somehow the volumes have been slightly higher whenever the stock has gone to a downtrend. So that's not an encouraging sign from a near term. It generally indicates that maybe some part of the selling is still pending, and that selling could probably take the stock to maybe one more round of correction on the downside. So I would suggest that closer to 3500 is where you should be looking to start buying if you are looking to buy. And for the individual who's already bought the stock, and I think if he's in from a medium term to long term haul, then I would suggest an averaging opportunity if the stock happens to come back to that 3500 zone.
All right, and and we have another query coming in from Akshay, who is saying, is it a good time to buy First Source Solutions? Does it make sense to look at this particular counter right now, Gaurang? What's your view over the longer term for First Source?
So I think you should look at stronger mid-cap companies in the IT universe, and as Alex and Kunal were discussing, I think L&T Technologies, L&T Infotech, Coforge, Persistent System, Mindtree, even Tech Mahindra would be preferred choice, just in case if you don't want to get into the large cap IT names. Prefer to be with these names.
Right, on that note, Gaurang as well as Kunal, thank you so much for taking the time, for answering all the questions that you did, and for also the lovely discussion we had on life insurance earlier in the program. Now, one of the stocks that has been absolutely buzzing in trade today, we mentioned this on the program as well, is Godrej Consumer. And this is not just on account of its earnings, where its PAT was in line. It showed decent growth across all segments, and soaps also hit a decent run rate and aided the Q4 performance. The input costs, of course, were a bit of a pressure, but it was a good performance. But the leadership change is what everyone is looking at. We've got the management of Godrej joining us. Nisaba Godrej is joining us to speak about the performance as well as a lot of other aspects. Thank you so much, ma'am, for joining us. What are the demand trends that you're seeing, and have they at all been impacted by the second wave of the pandemic, and how is it different from last year?
I think what we're seeing is that April has actually been quite strong, so a continuation of Q4. My expectations is that we will have a little bit more of that K demand curves that we've seen. So categories with tailwinds like hygiene or household insecticides will probably have strong growth this quarter, and maybe discretionary categories will be impacted to a certain extent. What we've seen this in the second wave, obviously it's much worse than the first wave, but we've not had the same supply side shocks that we had in the first wave because everything hasn't been fully shut down, and we've been better prepared.
Nisaba, the company has taken price hikes in certain categories. To what extent are you constrained to take further price hikes, looking at the current demand scenario?
So we've, as you know, in palm oil, we've seen sort of 40 to 50% inflation in prices, commodity prices over last year, and we have been taking calibrated price increases. I think we could see that through next year also. Obviously, you cannot pass those prices directly on to consumers, but the way we tend to manage this is, from a portfolio blend perspective, and from a portfolio blend perspective, and we tend to get, market share from smaller players who can't sort of play these commodity prices and they fall out. So we're quite confident of managing the soap portfolio well, like we have in the past year.
The commodity prices have continued to increase. How is the company actually looking at the volumes as well as margin outlook going ahead?
So we obviously, with these sort of price hikes, like I said, you can't pass this all on to consumers. So, we have to work on our fixed costs, work in other parts of our portfolio. I think in this environment, we've seen that GCPL has quite a significant business also outside of India. So we've used that to manage our margins. So our goal for the year is, to keep margins steady. But if we had to make a choice between margins and volume, we'd probably lean a bit more towards volumes.
All right, point taken on that. And the second wave of COVID-19 has actually hit the rural areas and the smaller towns, which was actually the saving grace during the first wave of COVID-19. Are you worried about this going ahead and impacting the rural growth?
So we can't obviously say for sure what is going to happen. Like I said, April sort of was a continuation of Q4. Our rural sales have been 2x of urban sales. So I think we'll have to sort of watch closely. GCPL's rural portfolio is only about 30%. So we're a bit, it's an opportunity for the future that we're a bit under-indexed in rural compared to some of our peers. So at this stage, we're not too worried about this, but, we'll have to see what happens going ahead.
Now, Nisaba, a lot of consumers had just gotten back to spending on discretionary items when the second wave hit. Do you see that there is a little bit of hesitancy creeping in that's affecting growth, say in the health color, in the hair color segment?
So, like I said, April has been a continuation of quarter four. But again, we could expect some impact in the discretionary portfolio. But then what we also saw once the wave passed, once people start going out, these products tend to pick up. We're sort of also focusing on what is our full year goal. And obviously you have to also be agile quarter to see what's happening and adjust as you go along, which is what we did last year.
Now, the HI segment has seen a strong double-digit growth. How sustainable are these growth levels, though?
So we continue, and obviously this 30% growth was on a degrowth base last year. So to just qualify that for our viewers. But we're quite confident in terms of the inputs that we've done in household insecticides, and the consumer sort of consciousness on health, protecting their health. No one wants to get malaria or dengue at this time is very strong. And what we've seen in the year, interestingly, is penetration in household insecticides across all formats has shifted quite a bit. So, I think we feel confident in sort of high single digits, low double digit growths in household insecticides going forward also.
All right, let's talk about your international business. What's the update on that particular front? Are you actually likely to see the recovery continue going ahead, because the other nations are past that COVID wave? So do you see the recovery continuing?
So I think our international business overall has done quite well. I'm very happy to report that our Africa business, which was a big focus area of starting to turn around that business, we've, delivered now 3 quarters of double-digit profitable and sustainable growth, and we see that going forward. Indonesia as an economy was quite impacted in this past year, much more than India actually. And even there, we've sort of seen single-digit growths this quarter. They had a good growth base, so their base of quarter four last year was in degrowth. Our LATAM business is also doing well. So we're feeling quite confident in the year ahead for the global business.
Let's talk about the new leadership change at Godrej Consumer Products. You can clearly see with the stock price, the street is cheering it. The stock is up since its IPO. So what can we actually expect from the new leadership, as well as what does this actually mean for Godrej Consumer Products?
So I think our focus is on, which I've spoken about, double-digit growth, sustainable double-digit growth, while building on, our purpose of bringing the goodness of health and beauty across emerging markets. I think Sudhir is a wonderful fit, very good both strategically and operationally. I think his track record speaks for that. And I think more importantly than just that, his value system, I think his cultural bit is also a good fit for GCPL. So let's see what happens. Obviously, he will now know that the expectations are very high after he's seen this 15% bump up in the morning. But we're expecting, and it's him, but it's also with the whole sort of GCPL team for him to come and set out, the next 5 years of growth. So I'm very excited.
All right, Ms. Nisaba Godrej, we'll leave it at there. Thank you for joining us, giving us a take on your earnings, as well as talking about the new leadership change that is taking place at Godrej Consumer Products. That's Nisaba Godrej, the chairperson and managing director at Godrej Consumer Products. All right, on that note, we'll slip into a break on this edition of Buy Now, Sell Now. But stay tuned, more news on the other side, so don't go anywhere.